Good morning. I appreciate you tuning in. Going to be starting a brand new painting, something a little bit exciting. Had a commission to paint a anniversary gift. A little couple, been married for a while now, coming up on their anniversary, and would like me to paint for them their wedding photo. So what I've got going on here is been commissioned to do a 20 by 24 canvas. I've prepped the canvas already with black gesso. Then I've hand drawn in the couple, and the couple sent me a few photos. One photo was of the bride by herself, and the other photo was of the groom by himself. And so I'm going to work at fusing both of those photos together. So with the canvas, I've also gone ahead and sort of modeled in a little bit of background color. I'll be painting this painting in oils, but the background is all done in acrylic. So I've come through here with a number of different colors, some olives, some gentle yellows and oranges, some gentle purples, and I've just sort of scumbled on really quickly this background. So now that I've hand drawn in our subjects, I think we're ready to go. So this should be pretty exciting. For the skin tones, I'll be using my 5 primary colors: raw umber, ultramarine blue, phthalo red, phthalo yellow, and titanium zinc white. So those 5 colors make up my flesh tones, and I've pre-mixed several flesh tones onto my palette already. I speak a little bit more about that in a past video. But please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Marc Harvill Art, and we'll get going. So as usual, I like to get started kind of in the center of a face. I'll work around the eye to begin with, get the eyelashes in, get the eyebrow, and then slowly start building around the eye socket. Pretty common. Start working on the other eye here. Again, just start working on getting the eyelashes in, the eyebrows, going with my darkest color here, which is my umber and blue and red, and then slowly start building into some of the lighter colors. My mid-tone colors are typically the umber, blue, red, but bringing in a little bit of yellow and a little bit of white. And then as I go to my lightest colors, I use a lot more of the reds, yellows, and whites, and just very small amounts of ultramarine blue or the umber. And just trying to get as close of a proximity as I can um, to what I'm seeing in the photograph that I'm working off of. And I can start working around the nose region here now. And again, I typically like to try to get some of the darkest tones worked in first and then kind of start building out from there. But I'll definitely jump back and forth. And again, I'm using a couple different brushes here. I've got my small round zero brush just for my dark colors, and then I change the brush over to a different brush for the lighter colors. And I don't use any mediums at all. I don't even like to wipe my brush clean in the mineral spirits. I prefer to just wipe it off with a towel and go back into my colors, and that way I can keep them nice and thick and pretty pure right from the tube. I often like to start a painting with a gray ground color on the canvas, but in this case I didn't really want to have to work the mottled background around the figures, so instead of starting with gray, I just decided to paint right on top of the mottled background. But typically the gray color helps me to see the values better. In this case, I just decided to forego that and try to work on those values the best I could. Now, I went a little bit darker on the skin tones than I see in the photograph, and I used a little bit less red, which I see a lot of in the photograph. And the photograph is not necessarily a high quality, high resolution, and so it's a little bit grainy, but that's fine. I'm just working around that, and if I have to ad lib a little bit, I will. But for the most part, they were fairly good photographs to work from. But I did change the tone of the skin just a little bit darker, and then later on I'll end up adding a glaze and reintroduce some of those red tones, and then finish it off with a dry brush blending of some of the lightest values that I see. So kind of fast forwarding here now, I've kind of more or less built in most of the face now, and now it's just a matter of kind of going back and fine tuning a couple things. Bring in the goatee in the chin area that I see, and just kind of work this all in. As usual, if you've tuned into some of my other paintings of portrait and people, I like to do everything wet on wet in one single sitting, and get probably 80% of all the blending and the colors and values kind of where I want them to be through that one single sitting, and allow that to dry, and then I can come back and I can start to tweak and add other layers on top of this. and use a bit more of a dry brush technique up into the point that I actually add a glaze. Apologize, some of the footage here isn't the best. I correct the camera a little bit later to get some better angles and footage, but I didn't get it here early on as I've been working on this painting. So going into the ear now, again, I like to start with the darks, go into my umbers and blues and reds, and then slowly start to add some of the titanium zinc white and lighten those values up a bit and start to work that. I do blending both on my palette as well as on the canvas itself, but I don't try to overblend. I like to still see brush strokes, but I also like to have some softness, so I always try to look for something kind of in the middle to make sure that it's not necessarily overworked, but still also retains some of the painting quality with some of the brush strokes. And I just find that that works a lot better for me. And so this is really the process I like to take. There's a lot of different ways to paint portraits. Some folks prefer to pretty much paint in and block in most of the primary surface of the face, and then later go back and start to adjust certain colors. I prefer just to kind of work in small regions and get the blending done in those regions, and then kind of move to the next region and sort of build from the center outward. Blending along the way as I go is just my preferred method. You may not like to paint this way, but it's just the way in which I like to do these types of portraits. So coming in and bringing the eyeglasses in here now, and now I can start working on our bride. And so once again, starting with the eyelashes and eyebrows, then I'll go into the eye region itself. Start working on the eyeball, and then go right into the nose, and then I can start working toward the cheeks and up through the forehead, and just sort of start spreading out. So that's just the way I like to tackle any face that I'm working on. So now just bringing in a little bit more light values here for the eyelid. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I do just use the 5 primary flesh tone colors of burnt umber or raw umber, ultramarine blue, and then phthalo red, phthalo yellow, and titanium zinc white. And from that, I will pre-mix usually I'll pre-mix about 6 to 8 flesh tone colors from those 5 colors, and have those sort of pre-mixed into piles. And then from that, I can start to blend my colors on the palette as well as on the canvas as I go along. When I paint an eyeball, I do not like to use pure white. I use pure white for really kind of sparingly in just some of the brightest sections, but for the most part, I just like to use my burnt umber with a little white and kind of create a smoky gray color, and that will be sort of the shadow of the eyeball. And then from that point on, I can sort of start to introduce small, minute amounts of white. Now, while it's still wet, it won't be a pure white. It'll just kind of mix with that gray and get a little bit lighter. When that eyeball fully dries, I'll go back and add a couple very simple strokes with some pure white, but kind of use it sparingly. So just kind of bringing in the next eyebrow, the next eyelid, and working into the next eye itself. Now I had about 14 hours of video footage, um, and I did some work even prior to that. I probably had a total of about 15 or 16 hours put into this painting, but ended up videoing maybe about 14 hours of footage. So in order for me to cull that down to about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, did take some work with editing, so I've had to fast forward quite a bit along the way. And that's always the challenge with doing these types of videos with this much detail in a painting, is you just simply don't have the luxury of capturing every single step that you'd like. Another tip I would give is when you're working on eyelashes, I don't typically add the entire eyelashes that I see. I like to skip around a little bit. I think it looks better if you just add them in little clumps and clusters and you spread them out a little bit more. So when it comes to eyelashes, I usually try not to over copy what I'm seeing in a photograph of the subject, and be a little more sparing with adding those in it. I just think it looks better. So continuing to work down the face here. As I mentioned, I'm using 3 or 4 brushes. I've got 2 very small number 0 brushes for my light and dark colors. I've also got a larger angular brush, and then I'm also using a flat brush as well, a bit larger flat brush. Those will help me to get the larger surface areas, and then I can use the tinier brushes for the finer details. Then work the shadow I see under the nose, bring in the upper lip region here now, and start slowly working my way down to the mouth and then into the chin region. So you just need to have a lot of patience with this process. It takes time. But like I said, when I work on a face, when I work on any portrait, I definitely try to do it all in one sitting, and continue working wet on wet to get all my blending in the best I can. And then I can always, again, come back once I let its surface area dry for a few days or a week or so, and start dry brush blending some more colors and start introducing some of those glazes as well. So in the beginning it doesn't look like a lot, but it slowly starts to build and starts to get exciting to see it come alive off the canvas. Now, as I bring in the teeth, I like to do the same thing I do with the eyeball. I like to use the umber and white to create that gray color. Obviously, teeth are not gray, but there's a lot of shadow in the mouth, and it's good to just bring in the shadow portions first, and then bring back in some of the whiter colors to make the teeth appear a little whiter. So same theory I use with the eyeball, I'll put into the teeth as well. And it just looks better that way. And a lot of the ear here is going to be covered up with hair, so we're only kind of seeing just the earlobe itself, really. And we'll add some nice earrings to that as well here a little bit later. So now I'm kind of starting to block in her hair, and I'm just using pure raw umber right now for this. And I'll paint this in, block it completely in, and then start using some highlights that I can slowly introduce and start to blend together for some softness. The individual strands of hair I'll bring in later once this dries a little better. But for now, I just wanted to get this all kind of blocked in and silhouetted, and she really starts to come alive, giving her a little bit of hair. And I find it easier to work on my lap when I'm trying to film these things. Obviously, it's not easy to film portrait work, but I find it's much easier for me to have it on my lap instead of putting it on the easel. Once I get a lot of the fine detail work in later on in the painting, I'll get it up onto the easel and be able to start working my glazes and start working some of my dry brush blending of the highlight colors. But so much fine detail goes into this. I often have to have a different mindset when I'm painting portraits because it's just so much fine detail that I do tend to get my hand really close to the metal ferrule on the brush, and I get really close to the canvas to get my nose up to it and work really these fine intricate details. So it's just a lot easier for me to keep the canvas on my lap and be able to attend to it, and it helps not to fatigue my arm or my hand quite as much. But as it starts to progress and as I start to move away from the fine detail work to some of the larger surface area work, then I can get it up onto the easel, kind of step away and start to see it as a whole instead of just individual parts and pieces. Right now, I'm just kind of focusing on just the individual aspects of the painting, and later on I can look at it as a whole. So bringing her down here into her neckline now, using some of my midtones, colors that I've mixed here, and when it comes to these large surface areas, I like to kind of block in all my primary colors, all the different values. And I try to outline where I'm seeing certain shadows, some of the muscularity in the neck, some of the bone structure in the collar region, and then down into the chest region. So I like to block those all in, and then I like to go back and just blend them together right on the canvas. That just works best for me as I'm working on large surface area blending. But using some of my larger brushes here now, and just really trying to block all this in here pretty quickly. And while it's still wet, then I can go ahead and start blending as well. And now at this point in time, bringing in a couple strands of hair. For the most part, it's still wet in the hair region, so I can bring these in and kind of allow this to be soft and get blended a little bit along the way. And a lot of there's a bit of a halo around her head. A lot of backlight is filtering through, so I'm just trying to capture some of that backlit hair strands that are sort of flowing in the wind. All right, so we can let her sit for a while and come back and start working on some of the clothes here on the suit that our groom is wearing. As I mentioned, this is a commission painting for a friend that wanted to have this painting done to surprise his wife for an anniversary gift. So I take these types of paintings really seriously. I try to take all my paintings seriously, but when it comes to portrait work, I really want to try to capture the moment the best I can and really do justice and honor to the subject matter here. In this case, trying to capture the likeness of the bride and the groom is really important. So definitely have the pressure on to do a really good job here for this commission. But it's always a little bit stressful when it comes to painting folks because you want to really honor them and really do their image justice in the photograph, really capture their likeness. So I apologize. I'm kind of getting a little bit cut off here on the camera, but hopefully I'll get that here corrected pretty soon. But just bringing in his shirt. So his shirt is kind of a soft sky blue, and so I kind of pre-mixed up a little blue and purple as a nice dark undercoat. And then on top of that, I can add some of the softer blues for the highlights. Okay, so just skipping ahead a little bit now, we're going back into his suit jacket, which was a sort of just a nice tan or cream color that I'm working on here now. And just try to bring all that in, grab the seams and the folds that I'm seeing in the photograph to the best of my ability. I decided to put his flower um, on the right side of his chest. Usually it's on the left side in a wedding photo, but if I did it that way, I figured it was going to kind of get hidden behind his face to some degree, and I didn't want to have it cumbering his wife and her hair flowing. So I just decided to go ahead and throw it on the right side of his chest instead of the left. So that was kind of something I thought about and was kind of deliberate, but I thought it'd look a lot better that way. So I'll just kind of outline it and paint around it, and then we can bring the rose back in afterward. So now just working on the flower and starting by once again bringing in the shadows that I'm seeing, and then I can slowly start working out from there with my lighter values. So once again, I just try to block in everything on this rose, and then just blend it right on the canvas as I bring in those lights and those darks together, and just kind of working on those and trying to form those shapes that I'm seeing from the photograph. And then once that dries, I'll go back and add some dry brush highlights to that. Another good reason I like to keep the canvas in my lap instead of on the easel is I do tend to rotate it quite a bit trying to reach certain angles. Obviously, because this is wet on wet, I need to be very careful that I don't get my hand on any region of the canvas that has the paint laid out for fear that I might end up smudging it, which I've done before. It's always frustrating. So I'm trying to be a little bit thoughtful and strategic about when I reach certain sections of the painting. And as I mentioned earlier, the background was done all in acrylic, so it's nice and dry. It's been dry for a few weeks now, and so there's no problem with me actually touching the underpainting. So the wedding dress is white, but I am bringing in a nice soft blue underpainting here that I'm blocking in for that now. Um, those will serve for my shadows later on, and then I'll slowly introduce some of the white to the dress. There's certain patterns. There's a floral or leaf patterns that are in her dress. So I want to cause those to be formed and sort of come out through using more of my lighter values in my whites. So a little bit of method to the madness on the rationale behind why I did that. But mostly because I wanted those leaf and floral patterns to really kind of come through. All right, so now I'm jumping forward here a little bit and working on the hand, and just trying to get all the different values in, get all the shadows, the knuckles, the bone structure, trying to figure all that out. So once again, I used a pretty simple, pretty basic palette. Didn't have to introduce a whole lot of extra colors to the palette, but mostly we're able to use my 5 primary colors and mixing them to to form different colors. And um, I did add a little dioxazine purple to my palette a bit later on to work on the flower as well as the shirt on our groom. But other than that, it was a pretty simple, pretty basic palette. But it was a fun project. It was definitely was a new and interesting challenge that I enjoyed. Kind of got me away from some of the things I've been kind of painting recently. Kind of a nice reprieve to do something a little bit different here, um, and just enjoy the process. It is fun to work on portraits, I think, um, and definitely requires me to use a bit of a different mindset. And I've mentioned before in past videos that how I work my paints um, and my subjects using acrylic is definitely different to the mindset I have to use for when I'm painting oils, specifically portraits and oils, and how I use more of a wet on wet technique. So just a lot of things to keep in mind and think about as I'm working on the painting. So we're skipping ahead here now, and I'm starting to work on some of those leaf and floral patterns that I'm seeing in the dress. And so I'm just coming back with with a bit lighter um, blue colors, a little bit more to the white, not a pure white. Still have a little bit of blue mixed in with that, but definitely a lighter value of our blues here, and get that all kind of worked in. Later on, I'll come back with more pure white in a glaze form, and I'll have it very transparent. And that the transparency, because I'll be using some medium for that, that that will allow me to help, make those colors a little more transparent. All right, so now at this point in time, I'm able to get my canvas onto the easel, and now I'm starting to introduce my glaze. So I've mixed a very thin glaze with some medium, and I've really kind of mixed flesh tone, but I've added a little bit more red to it. I wanted to definitely get a little more color, a little more blood flow, I think. Definitely more into the forehead, into the cheek region. And so allowing me to create these glazes now kind of helps to create some translucence, helps to soften some of my colors. And so I'm just using a real soft, fine brush here to introduce that. And then bringing some glazes as well into the clothing. Some highlights here with some of my tan colors. So really just by this point in time, a week or two has passed, and it's a lot drier, surface dry anyway, to the point that I can introduce these glazes and not have any fear or concern that I'm going to contaminate any parts of the painting. So now I'm bringing in my white glaze here. That's what's going to help to lighten the dress a little bit more. But I still want to have those patterns kind of showing through. So I want to make sure that as I'm creating these glazes, I'm creating a lot of transparency. All right, now a day or two's gone by. My glaze is dried. Now I can come back and start dry brush blending back in some more of my lightest flesh tones. So I'm just using a small round brush and my finger as well. And I'm just dry brush scumbling on really these highlights where I know I'm going to see them. And just it's not very wet. It's a very thick, stiff paint. There's not a lot of paint on the brush, which is important, and just enough that I'm able to kind of skim over the surface and bring back those highlights. I can come back and sort of bring back in some more of the hairline on the goatee and on the jaw. Bring back some more pure white here because again he's got the halo effect kind of going with the backlight coming through. So again, this is kind of the process I like to take when I paint oils and paint portraits. get 80-90% through with a wet on wet on a single sitting, and then come back with glazes after it's dried sufficiently, and then let that dry, and then come back with dry brush blending for the final part here, which I'm working on now. So start to dry brush here on our bride, and bringing in those nice light flesh tones where I know it's going to be hitting the light most prominently. And it really just helps to three-dimensionalize the subject and really kind of bring her to life here. So this is the pattern that works best for me, and certainly give it a try and see if it's something you like as well. There's a lot of ways to paint portraits. This is my preferred method, and hopefully it lends some help to you as well. And I tend to like to use my finger quite a bit. The finger is an excellent paint brushing tool. I highly recommend it. All right, so I think we're to a point now where we can sign my name on this thing. And I'll let this dry for 4, 5, 6 months. I'll let this dry, and then add a nice final varnish over it, protective varnish, which will really help it to really pop. Appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Marc Harvill Art. I appreciate you subscribing, and hopefully this video has been very helpful for you. And thanks so much for tuning in.